Let's head back to Georgia now for more testimony in the Gave My Son a Gun murder trial. The defendant, Colin Gray, is facing 29 counts, including 2 counts of second-degree murder, after prosecutors say he missed major warning signs and gave his son a gun for Christmas that was used in a school shooting. You're getting caught up on some key testimony in the case because we've been obsessed with Corey Richins, who, by the way, if you're just joining us, they're dark for the rest of the day. Judge had an issue with scheduling and sent the jury home. So we're going to go in. If you missed this yesterday, it's compelling, and it is damning for the defense. It is Colin Gray's 14-year-old, now 14-year-old daughter.
I'm going to start by just having you tell us your name.
My name is Jenni Gray.
And Jenny, how old are you?
I'm 14.
Okay. What grade are you currently in?
9th grade.
And tell us a little bit about what kind of things you like and that you like to do.
I like listening to music in my spare time, and I like reading.
Okay, great. Jenny, do you have any siblings?
Yes.
And tell me what their names are.
My oldest brother is named Colt Gray, and my youngest is Colin Gray.
How much older than you is Colt Gray?
He's 1 year older.
And how much younger than you is Colin Gray? Ish.
Ish, like, I'd say 4.
About 4 years younger?
Yeah.
So a good bit younger.
Mm-hmm.
And then you and Colt are like pretty close in age.
Yes, ma'am.
Who are your biological mom and dad?
Marcy Gray and Colin Gray.
Okay. Does Colin Gray also go by Coley? Okay. And do you currently live in Barrow County?
No, ma'am.
And I don't need you to say their names or anything, but who do you live with now?
My foster parents.
Okay. Do you currently have any contact with your biological parents?
No, ma'am.
And do you currently have any contact with your brother, Colt?
No, ma'am.
When was the last time, other than Coley, that you had any contact with anyone in your biological family?
I'd say 2 years ago.
Okay. So basically since early September of 2024?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Is that your choice?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, Jenny, I'm going to start by talking a little bit about your life growing up. Did y'all move around a lot with your family when you were growing up?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And if I asked you to tell me all the dates and specific places and times and stuff, would that be hard for you to do?
Extremely, yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I'm going to take you back to October of 2023. So that was during your 7th grade year when you moved back up to Barrow County with Colin Gray. Do you know what time frame I'm talking about?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Once you moved up there during your 7th grade year, who all was living in your house at that time?
My father, my older brother, and my younger brother.
Okay. And was this that same house that y'all lived in up until September of 2024?
Yes.
Okay. Explain to me where everyone would sleep in that house.
So I would sleep in the master bedroom.
Okay.
And then my father and my younger brother would share a room across from my room. And then Colt had his own room. It was like the smallest one.
Okay. And did you consider the room that was like next to Colin and Coley's room to be Colt's room?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did that room always have a bed in it?
No, ma'am.
Okay. When it didn't have a bed in it, where would Colt sleep?
When it didn't have a bed, he'd sleep in like our like laundry room place.
Okay.
Where our washing and drying.
Okay. Thank you. So you said Colt was 1 year older than you, so was he 1 grade ahead of you growing up?
Yes, ma'am.
So when you were in 7th grade, should he have been in 8th grade?
Yes, ma'am.
And when y'all first moved up from Fitzgerald to Barrow County in what would have been your 7th grade year, were there a few months before any of you got enrolled in school?
Yes, ma'am.
What did y'all do during the day during that time period?
We would just sit at the house, and sometimes Coley would go with my dad to his work. But
Okay. Was your dad working full time during that time?
yes, I think so.
Okay. And y'all were just home when he went to work?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. When y'all were just home, you said Coley went with your dad sometimes to work, so sometimes he would go with him and sometimes he would stay home with y'all?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Whenever Colin would leave y'all alone at the house, did he lock up the guns in the house or anything?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So talking about that same time frame, after y'all move up here, you said you're not in school for a few months. At some point, did you and Coley get enrolled in school in February of your 7th grade year?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. What middle school were you going to at that time? Was it Heyman Morris Middle School?
Yes, I'm pretty sure.
Okay. And was that middle school that was right next to the high school?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. In Barrow County?
Yes.
Perfect. So you start going in 7th grade. Did Colt ever go to school that first year y'all moved here? So when you were in 7th grade and he should have been in 8th?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Did Colin ever talk about why he didn't make Colt go to school?
Yes, ma'am, but not directly to me.
Okay. Did you ever hear anything that he said about it?
Yes.
Tell me what you remember.
I remember him being stressed over Colt's mental issues
Okay.
and kind of hesitating to enroll him in that because of his mental issues.
Because of his mental issues. Okay, thank you. So again, I'm still talking about that same kind of time frame. Tell me about what a normal day for your family would look like back then.
I would go to school and then, well, my dad would go to work and Coley would go to school and then I would go to school and then Colt stayed at the house until we got home.
What would y'all usually do like in the evenings after school?
We just go and do our own thing. We wouldn't really do anything together like as a family.
Okay. So did y'all like go out much as a family, like to the park or the playground, anything like that?
Sometimes, but not every day.
Okay. And did you ever do you remember going to the shooting range with Colin and Colt at some point?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and again, I'm not going to ask you to tell us exactly when that was. Was that one time or more than one time that you
Just one
remember?
time.
Okay. And do you remember?
Okay, now 14, hasn't talked to or been around her family for 2 years after this shooting. Let's get a break. We get you back into this Georgia courtroom for more testimony from the sister of the shooter, the daughter of this defendant.
This is the story of the Richins. Eric, a father of 3, met an untimely end, and Corey, his widow, wrote a children's book on grief.
She's also charged now with his murder.
He was faced with betrayal and terror.
I know her innocence.
Is their story a tragic romance?
Or a twisted tale of grief?
The truth will come out.
The Grief Author Murder Trial. Live coverage weekday mornings, 8, 7 Central on Court TV.
We are in Georgia, where the father of an accused school shooter is on trial. Prosecutors said that Colin Gray missed warning signs, gave his son a gun. That gun was used in the school shooting in 2024. Let's go back into the courtroom. We're watching key testimony in this case. This is Colin Gray's now 14-year-old daughter on the stand.
And do you remember Colin and Colt ever going to the shooting range again after that time y'all all went together?
I don't remember.
Okay. Jenni, tell me a little bit about how your relationship was with Colt during this time.
We were close. I mean, I definitely think that, he was closer kind of to me more than, our parents or Coley or, friends at school, like that kind of thing.
Okay.
But it was definitely close.
Okay. And how was Colt's relationship with Colin?
Sometimes it would be good, sometimes it wouldn't.
Okay. Would they fight a lot?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. What kind of things would they fight about?
They would fight a lot about Colt not getting his way with things.
Okay. Would that set Colt off if he didn't get his way?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And what did it look like when we're talking about them fighting?
Sometimes it would be, just yelling back and forth at each other, and sometimes it would be physical.
Okay. And when we're saying physical, kind of describe that for me.
There would be, punches thrown, a lot of shoving, just a lot of contact with each other.
And would that be both ways?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so from Colt and Colin?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did Colt ever damage anything in the house when he was mad?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you remember if he put any holes in doors or walls in that house that y'all were living at?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you remember specifically the door to your room, him putting a hole in it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And what was your relationship like with Colin?
It was all right. I mean, I think I was, close with him, but he definitely thought I was closer than I was with him.
Okay. Would he confide in you about things?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Even though you were pretty young at the time, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did he confide in you specifically about struggles he was having with Colt?
Yes, ma'am.
What kinds of things would he talk to you about regarding Colt?
Mainly just about his mental issues and how he wanted to get Colt help, but he didn't really know how to take that first step. So.
Okay. And how often would you say he would bring that up?
Definitely after they would have fights and stuff. And then if I were to bring it up, he would say that, trying to excuse it.
Okay. Would you say that was kind of a pretty regular topic of conversation in your house?
I'd say so, yes.
Okay. Did Colin ever talk about getting Colt medication?
Not to me directly, no.
Okay. Did you ever hear him talking about it?
I think I recall him talking to my grandma about it.
Okay.
And maybe the school, but that's the most.
Did he ever just talk about getting Colt into therapy?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Was that something he talked to you and other people about?
Yes, ma'am.
Did he ever ask for your advice? I know, again, that you were young, but did he ever ask for your advice about what to do with Colt?
Yes, ma'am.
And tell me what you remember telling him.
I remember I was didn't really know how to respond a lot because I wasn't really expecting an adult to ask me advice about that. But
Sure.
when I did give a response, I just, tried to get him to talk to other adults about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what about finding safer ways to store the guns in the house? Did Colin ever talk about that?
Yes.
Did he ever do anything to make the guns in the house safer or stored in a secure way?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And Jenny, we are going to pull up a text message exchange. It's between you and Colin's phone. And this is from State's Exhibit, I believe it's 158. Oh, 150. Okay. So it's previously been put into evidence on State's Exhibit 160. And this is going to be a text message exchange between you and Colin from your phone from July 3rd of 2024. And we're also going to pull that.
All right, we need a commercial break. We'll slip that in and get you back to Georgia for more of this compelling testimony. The daughter of the defendant and sister of the alleged shooter. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Michael Ayala, and we are in Georgia this afternoon where the murder trial for the father of an alleged school shooter remains underway. Defendant Colin Gray has pleaded not guilty to nearly 30 charges, second-degree murder and involuntary manslaughter included in those. Well, the case is part of the fallout from the 2024 shooting at Appalachian High School, which left 2 students and 2 teachers dead. Colt Gray, the defendant's teenage son, is facing multiple charges as well in connection with that shooting, but his case hasn't gone to trial as both sides continue to evaluate his mental health. I want to head back into court now. We've been catching you up on key testimony from Colin's daughter. Her name is Jenni Gray. She's on direct here by the state.
And we're also going to pull that up on the screen. It's going to show up in front and behind you.
Any issues, Mr. Defense?
No, Your Honor, no objection.
Have you reviewed these text messages before?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I'm just going to read through these specifically, and I'll ask you, do you remember this exact text conversation?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So I'm going to read through them, and then we'll talk about it a little bit. So this was from you to Colin. You said, hey, I think he calmed down. And Colin says, he doesn't calm down that quick. And Jenni, I can't live like this. It's seriously not good. Colin then goes on to say, it tears me up. I just want him happy. And man, he calls me everything, like he calls me everything in the book. So you said you don't remember the specific text conversation, but is this a good example of kind of how Colin would talk to you about Colt?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. He said he calls me everything in the book. Would Colt swear a lot at Colin when he was mad?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm going to show you another text message exchange, and this is between you and Marcy. This is from July 20th of 2024. And this has previously been tendered into evidence, which is states 160.
No objection. All right.
And looking at that, do you remember this specific conversation?
Faintly, I do, yes.
Okay, so you remember what's being talked about, but maybe not the exact words?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that fair? Okay. So I'll read through it, and then we'll talk about it. So this was from Colin's phone. It says, Colt had a horrible panic attack last night. And you said, why? He said, not really, or his phone said, not really sure. Basically had to drag him into daddy's bedroom and hold him for like 10 minutes while we did deep breathing, LOL. You said, so he just started like freaking out. And they said he came into the living room and asked us to call 911. Then he just started crying really loud. Then say, I've told him we're taking him to the doctor next week, gonna schedule an appointment for when you and Mamie come back so she can drive us. So I know I said that was from Colt's phone, but when you're reading that, who did that appear to be talking?
Oh, my mother.
Okay. And you said you remember the situation surrounding it. Where were you when these texts were going back and forth?
I was at my grandma's house in Fitzgerald.
Okay. And to your knowledge, did Colt ever get any kind of appointment like was being referenced there?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Did you go back up to Barrow County pretty shortly after that exchange?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. So when Colin was the only adult at home, would you say that he was a strict parent?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Did he ever try to control what y'all watched or did on your phones or did on your computers?
No, ma'am.
Where would he spend most of his time? And by him, I mean Colin. Where would he spend most of his time at home?
In his room.
In his room? Mm-hmm. Where would Colt spend most of his time?
In his room.
Okay. And by his room, you mean Colt in his own room, Colin in his own room?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I previously referenced there being guns in the house. How many guns do you remember knowing about in the house?
I can say I remember at least 3.
At least 3?
Yes.
Okay. And were any of those guns specifically Colt's gun?
Maybe.
Okay. Were any of those guns kept in Colt's room?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And when you say maybe, are you not wanting to answer as far as like ownership goes technically?
Well, I'm just confused. Like, I know they gave it to Colt, but I don't know like if like He didn't buy it himself.
Colt didn't buy it himself?
Someone bought it for him.
Okay. And when you say someone bought it for him, who gave it to him as the Christmas present?
My dad.
Okay. Did your dad buy Colt other accessories for that gun as well?
Yes, ma'am.
And where did Colt keep that gun?
In his room.
Okay. And when we say his room again, are we talking about that room that's directly across from the bathroom on the hallway?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Were you concerned about Colt having access to guns?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did you ever talk to Colin about that?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you ever talk to him specifically about taking the gun away from Colt?
Yes, ma'am.
Did he ever do that?
No, ma'am.
Would Colt keep the door to his room open, closed, or both?
Kind of both.
Both? Okay. Did Colin ever tell you why he didn't take the gun away from Colt?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Did you ever go into Colt's room to talk to him?
Sometimes.
Okay. And did Colin ever go into Colt's room?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, Jenni, do you remember a point in time where Colt put pictures and newspaper articles of and about Nicholas Cruz on his wall?
Yes, ma'am.
And what room was that in?
It was in the room across from the bathroom.
Okay. And that's the same room you said he kept his gun in?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. About how long do you think he had those up for? And I know you're not going to be able to tell me like a specific days or weeks, but what kind of time frame are we talking that it was up?
Definitely over the course of like 3 to 4 months leading up to the shooting.
Okay. So in your memory, several months before the shooting it was up.
Yes, ma'am.
Once those pictures were up? Were they coming up and down, or to your knowledge, were they just up on the wall?
They were up.
Okay. Now, did Colt start going to school finally in the fall of 2024 when he went to Appalachia High School?
Yes, ma'am.
Did he go every day?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And I want to talk briefly about September 4th of 2024. Tell me, once Colt started going to school, when he did go to school, what was the order that everyone would leave the house in the morning?
So my dad would leave first, and then Coley, and then Colt would, and then I would.
Okay. Is that just kind of by school and bus schedule?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And to your recollection, is that the order everybody left the house on September 4th of 2024?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did you go to school that day on September 4th of 24?
Yes, ma'am.
And when did you first find out that something had happened at Appalachia High School?
When we went in lockdown.
Okay. Do you remember texting with your dad about it?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so I'm going to show you a text message from about 12:20 on September 4th of 2024. And this, I believe, is from States 158. 156. And Jenni, do you remember those text messages?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Are those text messages that you were sending while you were in lockdown at Heyman Morris Middle School?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, we're going to pull those up on the screen, and I'm going to read through them. So this is at 12:19 p.m. on September 4th of 2024. Colin texted you and said, Jenni, have you talked to your brother? You respond, no, at 12:19 p.m. And then at 12:20 p.m. you said, but I think we're thinking the same thing and I don't want to talk about it over text. Colin then responds, still at 12:20 p.m. He says, yep, 10-4. I'll be there here in just a few. Let me know when you're back in the building and when I can come get you. You said, I think we're both thinking the same thing. What are you referencing there?
I'm referencing that I knew pretty well that Colt was the one that was doing it, and I knew pretty well that my dad knew too.
Okay. And was that before you heard from any news, police, or anything that it wasn't.
I was going to say, just think about what this little girl went through. She hasn't seen her family now in 2 years after all this went down. At the time, she's living in this house. Dad is so clueless, he's asking her for advice on what to do at 12 years old. She's also in school at the time this is happening. He texts her and says, and she's like, are you thinking what I'm thinking? I mean, just think about that as a 12-year-old. Now here she is testifying in court 2 years later. All right, we'll take a break, folks. When we come back, we'll have much more key testimony in the murder trial of Colin Gray. Keep it here on your front row seat to justice.
Tonight on Court TV.
I'm Vinny Politan. Welcome to Closing Arguments. We have a big hour ahead here.
Your deplorable actions are unforgivable.
The community still doesn't know how this Boston police officer died.
He can't prove one element of his case. It was a dramatic day, a dramatic moment inside the courtroom.
What's happening here?
It's unreal. Let me show you exactly what happened.
Closing Arguments with Vinny Politan. Tonight at 8/7 Central. Only on Court TV.
We're heading back now to Georgia for more testimony in the Gave My Son a Gun murder trial. Colin Gray, the father of an accused school shooter, is facing 29 counts for providing a gun to his son in 2024 as a result of that shooting at Appalachia High School as well. Now, prosecutors say the defendant gifted his son a gun despite being aware of his alleged mental health issues and possible threats that he had made to the school. Now, those weren't substantiated, but the police did come to the home. All right, right now, we're hearing from Colin's daughter. I want to go back in for more of her direct examination.
Once you heard there was a shooting, did you pretty much know?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. How did you end up getting home that day on September 4th?
I took the bus home.
Okay. When you got home, was there a lot of law enforcement there?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Was that pretty rough to come home to?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember the next day, so September 5th, going up to the tree house to get what was called a forensic interview?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Have you ever gone back and watched that interview, reviewed the recording of it or anything?
No.
Okay, so...
No, ma'am.
So on that day, September 5th, who drove you to the treehouse to get that interview?
My father.
Okay. Was he the only one in the car with you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. When you're on your way in to get that interview, did Colin tell you anything about how you should answer those questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Tell me what he told you.
So he told me, like, if they asked me anything, you know, about if he knew that Colt had problems and that his problems would lead up to this, that I should basically try to cover for him, and specifically about the pictures on the walls. He told me not to tell them that he knew what they were.
Okay. And when you say pictures on the wall, do you mean the pictures of Nicholas Cruz?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And the news articles about Nicholas Cruz?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so he told you to tell them that he, Colin, didn't know who that was?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Is that contrary to what you had actual knowledge of?
Yes, ma'am.
I guess, would that not be truthful?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Judge, can we approach briefly?
So I got to say, folks, that testimony that we just heard, I'm just keeping, I'll speak to you guys while they're in that sidebar. Just devastating. I had always wondered whether just the average citizen would even know who Nicholas Cruz was when that stuff was on his wall. Maybe the father didn't know. But according to the daughter, if you believe her testimony, he absolutely did know what was on that wall. And not only that, he's asking his 12-year-old daughter at some point to tell the police that perhaps he didn't know. He's asking her to lie for him to police. I mean, that's got to just shake this jury up. And again, I think this kind of just takes it to that next level in terms of, again, I was wondering if there was an opportunity for the defense. I think this just shut the door on all of that. All right, looks like that might be over. Excuse me. Let's go back into the courtroom.
Interview you went to September 5th of 2024. So at the time of the interview, the day after the shooting, did you feel pressure to cover for your dad, Colin?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. At the time of that interview, you were 13 at the time, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you know what was going to happen with you or with your family?
No, ma'am.
Were you nervous about what was going to happen with you and your family?
Yes, ma'am.
I know the interview was a long time ago, but looking back on what you do independently remember about the conversation, did you kind of downplay some things about your dad's knowledge of what was going on with Colt?
Yes, ma'am.
Would you say that you're in a more stable and supportive environment now than you were back then?
Check the meeting. I'll sustain if you want to ask more open-ended why, for instance.
So you testified previously that you now live with your foster parents. How does your home environment now compare to your home environment back then?
We had to check the relevance. Well, I think that I'm going to overrule you. Go ahead.
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Okay. It's definitely more stable, more loving, more family-like. We definitely do a lot more things as a family that we never would have done when we lived with my father.
Okay. Do you have a solid support system now?
Yes, ma'am.
Have you been in counseling since this happened?
Yes, ma'am.
And has the counseling and the support system and the family environment all kind of helped you over the past year and a half or so?
Extremely so, yes, ma'am.
Okay. So Jenni, is everything that you're telling us today the truth and what you independently remember from back then?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. I have no further questions. They'll probably have some questions for you though, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, before they get into cross, I want to bring in our guest joining us this hour, national trial attorney, former prosecutor Crystal Pettiford. Crystal, great to see you. Thank you so much for joining me on the program. I just want to get your opinion as to what we're hearing. I've been sort of peppering some of the testimony with my opinion. I think this is devastating testimony for the defense. I thought leading up to this, things had started to get difficult, but I think this really shuts the door on any avenue that the defense might have. But I'd love to get your thoughts.
I agree with you. It's very damning testimony. First of all, she's a child, and she's given it from her perspective of what it was like to live with her father, the knowledge that her father had about the problems and issues that her brother had mentally, the things he was interested in regarding the other school shooter, and his overall disposition in terms of the panic attacks, the anxiety. It gives full awareness that he was knowledgeable that his son was under some sort of mental health crisis, and he certainly should not have been entrusted with a weapon of any sort.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. Number one, they asked her if she was aware that Colt still had access to the gun. Now remember, she's 12 years old, maybe 13 at the time. She says yes. Was she concerned that Dad didn't take it away? Yes. So you've got a child, a teenager, maybe even a preteen, seeing that this situation is problematic to the point where she's wondering why Dad's not taking this gun away, and Dad doesn't take it away. I don't think it gets worse than that, Crystal.
Absolutely, I agree, because if she's a child and she has the wherewithal to say, you know what, given my brother's current temperament and the things that I've seen him say and do, I don't think it's safe for him to have a weapon. And for her as a child to make that a leap, for her to analyze the situation and that deeply, how can an adult that is in charge with his care not see the same?
It's crazy. All right, so now you're the defense, you're sitting there. What are you thinking? I was thinking they had to put him on regardless, but after this testimony, does it even make sense to put him on? Because, again, the state's just going to take him through all this stuff again, asking him questions about these conversations, these text messages. I'm not even sure what they do at this point.
I don't think they put him on the stand for sure. I don't even know what he could say. Clearly, he didn't do well with parenting. It seems like he was trying to pacify his son or hoping that whatever mental illness or whatever crisis he was going through internally would go away. He did not, by his daughter's account, seek any medical treatment, even though the child's mother suggested it. He also ignored his fascination with the school shooter. He ignored the panic attacks and kind of laughed it off. He even ignored the fact that he would be disrespected by this child and didn't seek any mental health counseling. From what we are aware of, there would be no benefit for putting him on the stand. It can only make him look worse.
Yeah, you know, parents can be in denial. There's no question. But when it gets to the point that a 12-year-old knows there's an issue, I don't think you can stick your head in the sand anymore and claim that that was the right thing to do. So I agree with you. Absolutely. All right, Crystal, stand by. We're going to take a break here, folks. When we come back, we'll go back into that courtroom for the cross-examination of the daughter of his sister, the shooter's sister, and we'll see what the defense tries to do on cross. Keep it here on Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
One thing needs to be abundantly clear. This is not a case about holding parents accountable for what their children do. That's not what this case is about. This case is about this defendant and his actions. His actions in allowing a child that he has custody over access to a firearm and ammunition after being warned that child was going to harm others.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Michael Ayala, and we are in Georgia for more testimony in the Gave My Son a Gun murder trial. Colin Gray, the father of accused school shooter Colt Gray, faces several counts, including second-degree murder. And prosecutors say that he gave his 14-year-old son Colt that rifle that he used to carry out that deadly attack at Appalachia High School in 2024, and that he never removed the gun from his son's possession, despite becoming aware of serious mental health issues. All right, we're getting you caught up on key testimony from the defendant's daughter. This is Colt's younger sister. Her name is Jenni. She's now on cross-examination by the defense.
Cross, Mr. Hobbs?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Ms. Gray.
Good afternoon.
My name's Brian Hobbs, and I'm Colin Gray's defense attorney. I'm going to ask you some questions.
Yes, sir.
Now, if I ask a question that doesn't make sense or is confusing, please let me know.
Yes,
I want
sir.
to make sure we're on the same page and you understand what I'm asking you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, this shooting incident happened on September 4th of 2024. Does that sound correct?
Yes, sir.
And you were interviewed and gave a statement to Miss Alicia Chandler on September 5th of 2024. Does that sound correct?
Yes, sir.
That would have been the day after the shooting.
Yes, sir.
Much closer in time to the shooting, obviously, than today.
Yes, sir.
All right. And that's been described as a forensic interview. Do you know what a forensic interview is?
No, sir.
They probably didn't tell you we want to bring you in for a forensic interview, for example.
No, sir.
Okay. Do you remember who you met with?
No, sir.
Does Alicia Chandler sound familiar? And if it doesn't, tell me it doesn't.
No, sir.
Okay. Like I said, this is over a year ago. There's probably some things you remember, and there's probably some things you don't remember. I'm going to ask you some questions about the statement you made on September 5th, and let's just see what we can figure out in terms of what you remember about that statement.
Yes, sir.
Okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. So you would have been 13 years old at the time?
Yes, sir.
And that means you would have been in, what, 8th grade?
Yes, sir.
And I think you told us you were going to Heyman Morris Middle School at the time.
Yes, sir.
And at that time, you were living at the house on, what was the street that the house was on? Do you remember?
No, sir.
You were living with Who else lived in the house with you? Let me ask the question that way.
My father, my older brother, and my younger brother.
Okay. Not your mom?
No, sir.
Okay. Now, your mom would visit occasionally, or your mom visited one time?
Yes, she visited occasionally, yes, sir.
Occasionally, okay. Did she ever stay there for an extended period of time? And by extended, I mean more than a day or two?
Yes, sir.
And when was that?
I can't remember.
Okay. Do you remember if your mom stayed there the summer before your 8th grade year?
I can't remember, sir.
Okay. Do you remember what it was like when your mom stayed there?
Yes, sir.
What was it like?
It was kind of chaotic at times.
More chaotic than when mom wasn't there?
Kind of the same.
Kind of the same. Okay. And do you recall an incident where your mom and Colt got into a big argument?
No, sir.
Okay. Do you remember a time when they got into a big argument over the gun?
No, sir.
Okay. Do you remember your father texting you to find out what happened in this argument over the gun?
No, sir.
Do you remember any arguments where Cole pushed your mom to the ground?
Yes, sir.
When was that?
I can't remember, sir.
Was it when you were a little kid, or was it when you were 13?
I was 12 to 13 years old, sir.
12 to 13 years old. Okay. What happened in that argument where your mom got pushed to the ground?
They got in an argument. I can't remember what it was about, but it ended with Colt going to his room and then my mother following him and trying to go and follow him into his room. And Colt didn't want that, so he pushed her out.
Okay, so your mom did go into the room.
Yes, sir.
Colt didn't want her to go into the room.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Was the argument, if you remember, did the argument start when Colt questioned your mother about the time she came up here threatening to kill him?
I can't remember, sir.
You don't remember that?
No, sir.
Okay. Do you remember if when your mom went into Colt's room, she tried to take the gun?
Yes, sir.
She did try to take the gun?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So after that incident, did your mom leave shortly thereafter?
Yes, sir.
Do you know why she left?
No, sir.
Do you know if she left because she wanted to, or did someone say, come pick her up, it's time for mom to go?
I can remember her parents coming up to our house and taking her back with them.
Okay. And her parents, that would be your grandparents, right?
Yes, sir.
And who were they?
Deborah, Paul Amos, and her husband. I forgot his name though.
Okay, that's okay. What'd you call them? Grandma, grandpa?
Yeah, that stuff like that, yeah.
Stuff like that? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, so let's fast forward past that. So I lied. Let's go back before that. When did you start living with your dad full time?
I don't remember, sir.
Do you remember why you started living with your dad full time?
Yes, sir.
And why was that?
I think it was because of my mom's drug use. And they didn't want me and Coley living with her while she was using drugs, so they sent us with our dad.
Do you know, is that DFAX or someone else?
Yeah, I think it was DFAX.
Okay, if you know.
Yes.
And when that happened, had you been living with your mom in Fitzgerald?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, so your dad came and picked you up?
Yes, sir.
And then he took you up to Winder?
Yes, sir.
And then you guys lived in Winder with your father, you and your brother, younger brother, Coley Jr., lived with your father and Colt here in Winder. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And you guys all lived in the same house?
Yes, sir.
You had your own bedroom?
Yes, sir.
Did you have your own bathroom?
Yes, sir.
And did anybody else share a room?
Yes, sir.
Who shared a room?
My father and my younger brother.
Okay, so your father, and that would be Coley Jr.?
Yes, sir.
Is that how you referred to him? I want to make sure. Is it little Coley? How did you refer to him?
Just Coley.
Okay, so your dad and Coley shared a room. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And your dad let you have the master bedroom and the bathroom?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, now we're going to go back up to September 2024. Mm-hmm. So your dad takes you to do the forensic interview.
Yes, sir.
Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And was he present during the interview?
No, sir.
Was he sitting next to you or anything like that?
No, sir.
So you were in a room by yourself with the interviewer?
Yes, sir.
Was there anybody else in the room with you?
No, sir.
Could you see your dad when you gave this interview?
No, sir.
Okay. And the interviewer asked you questions about yourself?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember?
Yes, sir.
Okay. She probably asked you how old you were?
Yes, sir.
She asked you what school you went to?
Yes, sir.
Did she ask you what you liked, music or anything else?
Yes, sir.
All right, time for us to step aside here, take a break, as the defense really starts their whole cross-examination by sort of deflecting towards the mom a little bit. Interesting choice there. We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll have more for Cross when we return. Keep it here on Court TV.
This is the story of the Richins. Eric, a father of 3, met an untimely end, and Corey, his widow, wrote a children's book on grief.
She's also charged now with his murder.
He was faced with betrayal and terror.
I know her innocence.
Is their story a tragic romance?
Or a twisted tale of grief?
The truth will come out.
The Grief Author Murder Trial. Live coverage weekday mornings, 8, 7 Central on Court TV.
Welcome back, folks. We're in Georgia, where the father of an accused school shooter is on trial for murder. Prosecutors say that Colin Gray gave his 14-year-old son Colt the gun that was used to kill 4 people at Appalachia High School back in 2024. I want to take you back into the courtroom now. The defense is still questioning Colt's younger sister about her interview with investigators the day after the shooting.
Did she ask you what you liked, music or anything else?
Yes, sir.
So kind of started off getting to know you a little bit?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then she probably started asking you some questions about your family.
Yes, sir.
Does that make sense? Did they ask you about Colt?
Yes, sir.
Did they ask you what he was like?
A little bit.
Okay. Do you remember telling them that he could be twitchy?
No, sir.
Do you remember telling them that he could be annoying?
No, sir.
Do you remember telling them that he could be chill?
No, sir.
Do you remember telling them that he could be closed off?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember telling them that he used to like playing video games?
Yes, sir.
Did he like to play video games with you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. If you remember, did you guys ever play Minecraft, for example?
I can't remember, sir.
You don't remember about Minecraft?
No, sir.
Okay. Do you remember if he ever created a server for just the two of you to play on Minecraft, he being Colt?
I don't remember, sir.
Okay. Have you ever played Minecraft?
Yes, sir.
I just want to make sure I'm saying that right. All right, so there is a game called Minecraft.
Yes, sir.
But you don't remember playing it with your brother?
No, sir.
Okay. And let's see. You said that during the day, your dad would go to work, usually. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And then you kind of gave us an order of how that went. You said that Coley, your youngest brother, he would go to school first.
Yes, sir.
Would your dad take him to school?
Yes, sir.
So dad would leave before you and Colt would leave?
Yes, sir.
So it was up to you and Colt to get on the bus yourselves?
Yes, sir.
Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir.
And then I think you said Colt's bus came first and then yours?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, did they ask you to describe your dad?
I can't remember, sir.
Okay. Do you remember saying that your dad is energetic?
No, sir.
Do you remember saying your dad's positive?
No, sir.
Do you remember saying your dad's happy all the time?
No, sir.
Okay. They asked you about moving several times. Did y'all move a lot?
Yes, sir.
Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you about all the different addresses or anything like that. Now, you knew a little bit about why you guys moved. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Did it have to do with financial issues?
Yes, sir.
Did it have to do with your mom's issues?
Yes, sir.
And sometimes you would stay with your mom, and sometimes you would stay with your dad.
Yes, sir.
And then sometimes you might stay with your grandmother.
Yes, sir.
And do you remember telling them that sometimes your mom would go back and forth between living in one house with you guys and then also living with grandma as well?
Yes, sir.
Does that sound right?
Yes, sir.
And that was in Fitzgerald?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you moved up here to Winder, you said, well, you didn't say what the date was. Do you remember roughly the date you moved up here?
No, sir.
It's okay if you don't. But you moved up here when Defect said your dad had to come pick you up.
Yes, sir.
Is that fair? Okay. Sometimes it's easier to remember events than dates. All right. Now, once you came up to Winder, would your grandmother come up here and visit you?
Not a lot. But
okay.
I'm
so
sure.
A lot can mean a lot of different things. What's a lot mean to you?
I'm sure she's come up at least like once or twice, but it wasn't like, every other weekend or something like that.
Okay. So in the time you lived up in Winder, you think grandma came to visit once or twice?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Not every month, for example?
No, sir.
Okay. Now, when you gave this statement in September of 2024, did they ask you about how everyone got along in the house?
Yes, sir.
Does that sound familiar?
Yes, sir.
All right. If you remember, how did your dad and Coley get along?
I remember they got along pretty well.
Okay.
Yeah, they were close.
Did they ask you how you and your dad got along?
Yes, sir.
And what did you tell them, if you remember?
I don't remember.
Okay. Did they ask you how you and Colt got along?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember what you told them?
No, sir.
Okay. Do you remember if you told them whether or not he was annoying or pestering?
No, sir.
Do you remember if you told them that you were scared of him?
No, sir.
Do you remember if you told them whether or not he put a hole in your door?
No, sir.
Put a hole in the wall?
No, sir.
Do you remember if they asked you about whether or not people get in fights in the house?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you remember saying if fights to you are arguments or fights to you are physical altercations? Or are they both?
They're both.
Okay. So when you say fights, you can mean arguments, but you can also mean physical stuff as well, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The arguments that were in your house, did they involve you? Like, were you one of the people arguing?
No, sir.
Was Coley one of the people arguing?
No, sir.
To have an argument, you usually need to have two people, right?
Yes, sir.
So the only two people left in the house are your dad and Colt. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So that's where the arguments were?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Were they every day?
No, sir.
Do you remember telling the interviewer in September of 24 how often these arguments took place?
No, sir.
And since we know that your mom was up there at least one time or some of the times, were some of the arguments with your mom?
Yes, sir.
And I should clarify that. Not you and your mom, but your mom and Colt, for example.
Yes, sir.
Your mom and your dad, for example.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you remember saying that in regards to these arguments that Colt liked to instigate these arguments? What does instigate mean to you?
To just, kind of add like fuel to the fire almost.
Add fuel to the fire, okay. Did, if you remember, did Colt ever start these arguments?
Yes, sir.
And do you remember telling the interviewer in that statement of September 24 that Colt could be mean?
I don't remember, sir.
Okay.
All right, some of the themes becoming clear here. Let's bring in our guest, still with us, National Trial Attorney and former prosecutor Crystal Pettiford. Crystal, I want to get your thoughts on this cross-examination, the direction it seems to be going, and this idea that when you're cross-examining a witness like this, you do have to be careful. I think he's doing a decent job of that.
I think he's doing a great job with that. She's still a child and dealing with a very sensitive subject matter. Her family has essentially fallen apart because of what she's testifying to today. So I think he's doing a great job building a rapport with her, not being overly aggressive. It seems to me that he is not placing the blame on mom, but trying to paint the picture that dad had a very difficult job based on his son's behaviors, based on the issues surrounding mom and her addiction issues, and just going from, I guess being a visiting parent to the primary parent of these children.
Yeah, that is an issue here for sure. So I want to ask you, because again, it was because of the issues that the mom was having that all the kids ended up with him. And maybe he was just ill-suited to it, but again, they're his kids. So you got to be ready for it if you're going to be a dad, right? You can't just say, oh, she did this and I wasn't ready for all this. This is what's happening. Yeah. The other thing I noticed is he's trying to sort of, and they did this in opening statements, kind of putting some of this on Colt himself. Because that's really, I think, the one avenue that they maybe have left is that you've got to look at this as a very gun-friendly state. You've got to look at this as this was his fault. He was hiding stuff from us. He was a person who would instigate things, and that's where you should look to for blame here.
Yes, it seems like they're also trying to say he was also susceptible to Colt's behaviors. He was doing all that he could to be a parent, and that he was also verbally abused. He was also physically touched by his son on certain times. That he was a loving, at least the question seemed to elicit that he was a fun dad, laid back, and that perhaps the son took advantage of that. But trying to say like his son was the person that was responsible for his actions and not him as a dad.
Yeah, no doubt. And he actually gave him the gun for a good reason. He said that would maybe go out, you get him up from behind that computer, we can go out, hunting and whatnot. It didn't turn out the right way. All right, Crystal, thank you so much for joining me so much. Folks, stick around. Coming up, more testimony in the murder trial of Colin Gray, so keep it here on your front row seat to justice. Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Michael Ayala, and we are tracking several cases today here at Court TV. In Utah, testimony ended early today in the Corey Richins murder trial due to unforeseen circumstances unrelated to the case. Testimony is expected to pick up there tomorrow morning. And in Michigan, it's jury view day in the trial of Dale Warner. Jurors took a break from testimony so they could tour key locations related to the death of Warner's once missing wife, Dee. And in Georgia, we're catching you up on key testimony in the murder trial of Colin Gray. He's the father accused of giving his son the gun used in the Appalachia school shooting that ended up killing 4 people. I want to take you back into court now for more testimony. Colin's daughter is on the stand. She's on cross by the defense.
Do you remember saying he would talk about how his life was a struggle?
No, sir.
About how he hates his dad?
No, sir.
Do you remember telling the interviewer that Colt didn't like the fact that he had trouble with bullies?
No, sir.
Did they ask you if you knew anything about the bullying?
No, sir.
Do you remember telling the interviewer that Colt had been transferred to a different school because of the bullying?
No, sir.
Do you remember that telling the interviewer that Colt could get really frustrated about stuff?
No, sir.
That he could get really angry and yell out stuff?
No, sir.
Do you remember telling the interviewer he used to yell that he hates you?
No, sir.
That he hates his dad?
No, sir.
Do you remember if he yelled anything else at your dad or anything at your dad when they argued?
He would cuss a lot.
Colt would cuss a lot?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you remember saying that during these arguments you might just go into your room, put your headphones on?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember whether or not you told the interviewer that Colt had threatened your dad?
No, sir.
Do you remember telling the interviewer that the arguments between Colt and your dad usually started because Colt didn't get something he wanted?
Yes, sir.
Now, when you say something he wanted, what are we talking about? Like, what would he typically want that maybe would start an argument, if you can remember?
I can remember a lot being about, like, his gun, like accessories for it and stuff.
Like accessories for his gun?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So he might ask your dad for an accessory for your gun, and your dad would say no, and that would lead to an argument?
Yes, sir.
And you would have told the interviewer that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you remember what kind of accessories they would argue about?
No, sir.
Now, you have testified today that there were physical fights between your dad and Colt.
Yes, sir.
Is that correct? And did Colt ever charge at your father?
Yes, sir.
And what would happen when he did that?
He would fight back. Like,
what would your dad do in response?
He would fight back.
Your dad would fight back? How?
Yeah.
Specifically?
He would just try to get him to stop, like, you know, push him to the ground, stuff like that.
Okay. Would he ever put him in a bear hug?
Yes, sir.
Grab and hold him until he calmed down?
Yes, sir.
And I believe you said earlier in describing physical altercations, are you saying your dad would make a fist and try and hit Colt with his fist?
Yes, sir.
And you would have told that to the interviewer when they asked that question in September of 2004, right?
If I can remember.
Okay. Colt would try and punch your dad?
Yes, sir.
Would you have told the interviewer that?
I don't remember.
Okay. What would happen when your dad made a fist and swung at Colt? Would he hit him?
What do you mean?
Well, you said your dad would make a fist, right?
Yeah.
And that they would punch at each other, right?
Yes.
So what would happen when that happened? What did you see?
I don't remember.
Okay. Do you remember telling the interviewer that you never saw your dad hit Colt?
No, sir.
That you never saw your dad kick Colt?
No, sir.
That you never saw your dad choke Colt?
No, sir.
You don't remember telling the interviewer any of that?
No, sir.
Okay. Do you remember telling the interviewer that in these altercations, once Colt would calm down, typically he would end up throwing something?
No, sir.
Do you remember telling the interviewer that there were usually stages to these fights?
No, sir.
Do you remember telling the interviewer there was a fight about a month before school started between your dad and Colt?
No, sir.
Do you remember telling the interviewer that your dad didn't really know about anything Colt was doing on his computer?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember telling the interviewer that Colt was very watchy about his privacy and stuff?
No, sir.
Was Colt concerned about the privacy on his computer, to your knowledge?
I think a little bit, you know.
Do you remember telling the interviewer that Colt would use burner accounts?
No, sir.
Do you remember telling the interviewer that Colt would delete his accounts after a week or two?
Yes, sir.
You do remember that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you know why he would delete his accounts?
No, sir.
Do you remember telling the interviewer that the names of his accounts were just random combinations of letters and numbers?
No, sir.
Do you remember telling the interviewer that Colt would be on websites like Tumblr?
No, sir.
Websites like YouTube?
No, sir.
Twitch?
No, sir.
Discord?
Yes, sir.
Pinterest?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember telling the interviewer on Pinterest Colt would make boards about like inspiration and vibes?
No, sir.
People that he looked up to?
Yes, sir.
Aesthetics?
No, sir.
Do you know who some of the people would be on his Pinterest board?
Not by name, no.
Do you remember Colt talking to you about school shooters?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember telling the interviewer that he would act as if you knew who they were?
Yes,
these
sir.
shooters. Did you know who they were before he told you?
No, sir.
Were you interested in any of those folks?
No, sir.
Would you act like you were when you talked to Colt?
No, sir.
And you didn't tell the interviewer that? You did not tell the interviewer you would act as if you were interested when he told you about the school shooters?
Not that I remember, no, sir.
Okay. You remember telling the interviewer Colt would act like that kind of stuff was normal?
Yes, sir.
That it was common knowledge?
Yes, sir.
You would say that some of the stuff that he would put on the Pinterest boards, did you tell the interviewer he would also print out photos of them?
Yes, sir.
Or print out articles?
Yes, sir.
And stuff like that, and put it on the walls?
Yes, sir.
Would your dad ever go into Colt's room?
Yes, sir.
Would your dad ever go?
All right, we'll step aside here, folks. We'll take a break. We'll have more of the cross-examination of Jenni when we return. Keep it here on Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
This is the story of the Richins. Eric, a father of 3, met an untimely end, and Corey, his widow, wrote a children's book on grief.
She's also charged now with his murder.
He was faced with betrayal and terror.
I know her innocence.
Is their story a tragic romance?
Or a twisted tale of grief?
The truth will come out.
The Grief Author Murder Trial. Live coverage weekday mornings, 8, 7 Central on Court TV.
At some point during that conversation, does he ask you a question that disturbs you?
Yes.
And what was that question?
If I do something terrible, would you still love me? I think that's the way it was worded.
Okay.
All right, that was Colt Gray's maternal grandmother with a really sort of strong testimony for the state when she took the stand. Well, why don't we go back now to Georgia for the murder trial against defendant Colin Gray. Now, he's the father of the accused shooter in this case, his 14-year-old son, Colt Gray. He gave him access to a rifle that he ended up using in the Appalachia school shooting that killed 4 people and injured 9 others. Well, on the stand now is the defendant's daughter, Colt's younger sister, Jenni. She was about 12 or 13 around this time that it all went down. She's on cross here by the defense.
Did your dad ever go into the computer room?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember telling the interviewer that your dad usually never goes in there?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember telling the interviewer why Colt would change his account so much?
No, sir.
Did you ever tell the interviewer it was because he was nervous about police?
No, sir.
That he was nervous about the FBI?
No, sir.
That he was eerie about that kind of stuff?
No, sir.
That he would try to avoid anything that's connected to them?
No, sir.
That he would try his best to hide himself?
No, sir.
You didn't tell any of that stuff to the interviewer?
Not that I remember, no.
Not that you remember. Okay. Do you remember telling the interviewer that the account names were just clusters of numbers and letters and stuff that Colt used?
No, sir.
That his usernames or account names were just random sequences of these different letters and numbers?
No, sir.
You don't remember telling them that?
No, sir.
Okay. Do you remember telling the interviewer that Colt would watch stuff on YouTube?
No, sir.
You don't remember telling him that he would watch court videos?
No, sir.
You don't remember telling the interviewer he would watch footage of other people?
No, sir.
You don't remember telling the interviewer Colt would watch videos of people he looked up to?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember telling the interviewer what he would watch on Twitch?
No, sir.
Do you remember telling the interviewer that he would talk to you, Colt would talk to you on Discord?
No, sir.
Do you remember telling the interviewer that Discord was one of those that he routinely changed his name very quickly, his username?
No, sir.
Do you remember telling the interviewer that he would look stuff up about different people on Reddit?
No, sir.
Do you remember telling the interviewer that Colt would have friends that he spoke to on Discord?
No, sir.
Do you remember telling the interviewer on the morning of the shooter that Colt was acting kind of different?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember telling the interviewer that Colt told you about making a video?
Yes, sir.
Why did that seem strange or weird?
I forgot, sir.
Do you remember when Colt left for school that morning?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember seeing his backpack?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember seeing a big piece of poster board sticking out of his backpack?
Yes, sir.
Was it wrapped up, the poster board?
Yes, sir.
Was there a hat on top of the poster board?
I don't remember.
Do you remember if the poster board, I think I just asked this, but bear with me, the poster board stuck up out of the backpack?
Yes, sir.
Did you think that was strange? Did he have this giant poster board sticking out of his backpack?
Yes, sir.
How long had you been in school at that point?
What do you mean? I don't understand.
So, no, you're okay, that's fine. September, when did school start?
I don't remember, sir.
Okay, had you been in for like a couple weeks?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember, had Colt been going to school consistently or not consistently at that time?
Not consistently.
Okay. Did you ask Colt about the poster board sticking out of his backpack?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember if he said anything about what it was?
He said that it was for a project at school.
Did that seem strange to you?
Not at the moment, no.
You said that, do you remember telling the interviewer that you and Colt would text each other a lot?
No, sir.
Did you guys text each other a lot? And a lot's one of those weird words that can be different. Did you guys text?
Yes, sir.
How often would you text each other? Per day. Let's just use one day as an example.
We wouldn't text every day, but when we did, it wasn't like long conversations, I don't think.
Okay. Did he ever text you any memes?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember any specific ones?
No, sir.
You said you saw pictures and let me ask you this. You said you saw pictures on the wall that Colt had put on the wall.
Yes, sir.
What room was that in?
It was the room across from the bathroom.
Across from the bathroom. Okay. Did you know were they photographs of people?
Yes, sir.
Did you know who the photographs of the people in the photographs were?
Not by name, but I knew that they had something to do with shootings.
Okay. Do you remember telling the interviewer that your dad didn't know who those people were?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember telling the interviewer that Colt wouldn't talk around that kind of stuff around your dad?
No, sir.
you remember telling the interviewer that Colt was allowed to be around guns?
Yes, sir.
You remember telling the interviewer that Colt and his dad would go to the shooting range sometimes?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember telling the interviewer that they would go to the range once a year, something like that?
No, sir.
Do you think it was more often?
I don't know, sir.
Okay. And do you remember telling the interviewer that the guns were long guns that they would go to the range with?
Yes, sir.
He never had the gun.
No, sir.
Do you remember telling the interviewer that you and your dad had had a conversation about Colt having anger issues?
Yes, sir.
And is that when you were talking to your dad about trying to find him a therapist?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember telling the interviewer that your dad was very close to having a therapist or counselor set up for Colt?
No, sir.
Do you remember having a conversation with your dad about Colt being suicidal?
No, sir.
About Colt being homicidal?
No, sir.
Wanting to hurt someone else?
No, sir.
Do you remember having conversations with your dad where he said he was worried about Colt?
Yes, sir.
Were you ever nervous around Colt?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember telling the interviewer you were nervous after arguments with Colt?
No, sir.
Do you remember telling the interviewer that your dad wanted to get Colt on medication?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember telling the interviewer that Colt would talk to you about looking up these people he looked up to?
No, sir.
Do you remember telling the interviewer that Colt tried to be discreet about it?
No, sir.
All right, I want to bring in my guest. Joining me this hour is trial attorney Jamie White. Jamie, great to see you as always. Thank you so much for joining me on the program. And you can kind of see what the defense is doing here. I think they're keeping good control in a gentle way of this witness through the way they're asking questions. She's basically saying yes, sir, no, sir, which is a good thing certainly for the defense. I'd love to get your thoughts on how this is going and the information that they're sort of providing. And I use that word specifically because they're not really allowing her to say much. They're providing the information they want this jury to hear.
So I think there's two things going on. First of all, I believe that there's probably going to be an attempt to discredit the interview itself, the original interview. You know, anytime you interview a minor child, there's a forensic protocol where people are trained, they're trained to ask questions in a particular way. And I suspect at some point in time that will become part of the defense argument that that protocol was not followed. More importantly, though, what we're seeing here is a setup for a presentation of inconsistent statements, or the fact that she couldn't remember things. What surprises me, Michael, though, is that I agree, he is being gentle, she's being polite. However, usually when he's clearly reading a transcript from her interview, and he should be confronting her with these statements in front of the jury, whether that's refreshing her memory with a transcript or, literally impeaching her based on inconsistent statements that she's making under oath today versus what she told the police at some particular time. I think that would be effective. And I suspect he's going to try to get there another way, probably through the person that actually did the interview. But I do think it's a missed opportunity. I think you could politely impeach this witness based on her, what presumably are going to be inconsistent statements, or, showing the jury that she really doesn't remember a vast amount of what occurred during this period of time.
Yeah, I would have to agree. And some of the folks online, and even I was a little bit confused why he wasn't doing that, because they're saying, well, she must have actually said those things, right? He couldn't just pull that stuff out of thin air and say, do you remember telling him this? When really she never said that. So you assume he's pulling it from this interview, but he's not backing that up and letting the jury know that that's what he's doing. I wonder if they're following.
Yeah, well, I think they're probably, they have to be presuming that he's pulling these questions from some sort of prior interaction with law enforcement. But again, yeah, I think for a jury, she should have that transcript up there with her. I mean, that he should have presented her with that the first time she said she didn't remember. And he should be, it would take a long time, but he should be taking every single one of those questions that he appears to have an answer to that she doesn't remember or is told something different. She should be confronted with that over and over and over and over again. So at the end of the day, the argument will be that, you can disregard her testimony as it pertains to anything damaging involving the father.
Yeah, and she's saying she doesn't remember so much. It would be very effective, but maybe the nature of the witness has sort of backed him away from that a little bit. I'm not sure why exactly it's going down this way.